Now, this month, labour movements around the world are celebrating workers' rights. The introduction of new labour laws after 1994 in South Africa meant an end to the exploitation of workers, with the apartheid government thriving on cheap labour with virtually no rights. Before the dawn of democracy, black workers had no rights in the labour market. So far, how far has the country come over the past 30 years in terms of workers' rights? For more on this, we are joined by Wits University economist Chris Malikane. Chris, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, tell us, how have labour movements and worker activism really shaped economic policies and labour rights in South Africa over the past 3 decades?
Yes, in fact, workers have made huge contributions to the development of economic policy. For an example, we know that the apartheid system relied on the cheap labor market and where workers did not have significant rights. So what happened is that after 1994, workers made huge contributions by making proposals on new labor legislation like the Labor Relations Act, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Employment Equity Act, So all these labor laws went a long way in alleviating the suffering of workers and the brutality of employers in the workplace.
Can you elaborate on the key changes in the labour conditions, employment opportunities and community development within especially the mining sector since democracy?
Yeah, so that's where the challenge is. Because insofar as issues in the workplace are concerned, workers won those rights from legislation. But when you look at practically whether workers in the workplace actually managed to effect, or employers were compelled by the state to effect labor legislation, that's where the challenge begins. Because at the microeconomic level, you discover that employers still exercise more power over workers. And this has been made worse by the situation, by the condition that in most instances, you find that workers after 1994, they became casualized, they became precarious, they became employed in precarious types of labor, and the state adopted a policy of removing itself from directly employing workers and therefore strengthening the rights of workers in the economy. So when it comes to the practical implementation and the effectiveness of these laws, that's where the problem starts. Employment equity, we know the reports there that there's insufficient training, particularly of black workers, affirmative action, the continued discrimination when it comes to wages and salaries, the apartheid wage gap still exists, the gender wage gap still exists. So all these intricacies, these mechanisms that we inherited from the colonial apartheid system, they are still alive and kicking today, despite the laws that workers won on the table.
But it seems the Labour Federation, COSATU, appears to be more optimistic. What are the notable achievements, if you will, and ongoing challenges in labour rights and worker employment during South Africa's democratic era? I mean, this is a point that's been emphasised by COSATU.
Yeah, of course, labour rights have been won. There's no doubt about that. But the effectiveness or the implementation of those rights so that we have an equitable labor market, we are far from that. There's been, for example, the government has got the sectoral minimum wages. I remember when I was also advisor to COSATU, an economist there, we discovered that there's been massive violation of those minimum wages in the sectors. And the workers, like I say, workers in the specific sectors, when they confront the employers, the power relations are different from what you find trade unions articulate in the public sphere. A trade union can appear very progressive and very courageous in confronting employers. But what we know is that at the micro level, where the employer and the employee interact, the power relations have not changed.
Mr. Malikane, despite 3 decades of democracy, South Africa still grapples with inequality. How have economic policies evolved to really address this issue, particularly concerning workers' income disparities?
The main intervention that the state implemented after 1994 was the social grant. The increase in the in the old age grant, the extension of the social grants to children, child support grant, and other grants, disability grant and so forth.
Yeah.
So that was a major input and a major impetus, a major achievement that was achieved after 1994. But in my view, that has been the propeller of the small decrease in inequality that we've experienced. It is not inequality, the decrease in inequality is not due to the mechanisms of the economy in the labor market, addressing the low wage economy, it was not coming from that. It was coming from the fact that the state was supplementing workers' incomes with these grants. So the structure of the economy still reproduces the apartheid inequalities.
Yeah.
And that's why it's very, very difficult to reduce inequality in South Africa, because that's economic structure. Those patterns of ownership have not changed.
But Chris, how do you see the intersection between democracy, economic development and labor rights? And what lessons can be drawn from South Africa's journey?
What we can draw from South Africa is that, you can have democracy where people vote now and then, where on paper people can say we've got rights, we've got the right to organize and so forth and so forth. But if you don't have a state that is capable of effecting the laws, of protecting the vulnerable, the less powerful at the microeconomic level, where you have a democracy where the owners of the means of production have power over the workers, then that democracy will fail to deliver the goods. Because remember that the wage in any modern economy, the wage is the main source of income. And if the wages are not calibrated in a manner that addresses inequality, we are going to have a problem. And I know very well as an economist that the wage is tied to productivity. So what you have in South Africa is that even if workers are productive, their wages are still suppressed. They don't increase as much as the increase in productivity, because inequality continues to worsen. The share of workers in national income is not improving compared to the 1990s, for example.
Let's go back to the mining case study. What strategies are needed to really ensure that mining communities and workers actually benefit fully from the country's mineral wealth, especially in a democratic context?
Yeah. Well, what needs to happen, number one, we need workers to organize themselves in trade unions like they do, but to extend their activism to communities so that they are able to capture value in the economy through extra workplace activities, through organizing your non-governmental organization, your community-based organization, a vibrant worker-based civil society formations to fight for the rights of communities or working class communities to capture value from the economy. So there is a strong need for the trade unions to interact, to rebuild that connection with communities in order to, and then on top of that, we need the media, a media that consistently highlights these challenges, so that the media educates working class communities of their rights and what is due to them. Because if you've got the media that does not push forward these messages, then the population will remain unaware of their rights. So there's that thing, the interaction between the media, civil society formations, and the trade unions. There needs to be that organic link that happens for the working class as a whole to benefit from the economy.
Chris, as we wrap up our conversation, but also keeping in mind these upcoming elections and the social inequality that we spoke of, what role do you believe labor unions and workers' movements will play in really shaping political discourse?
Labor unions, they need to put forward a minimum set of demands, and they need to tell their members, to say, you can vote for any political party, but we as trade unions, we believe that you must look at political parties. If this political party is committing to these few sets of demands that we have here, then you can exercise your right and vote for that party. But if the party does not have those demands, then don't waste your time with that party. So far, we have not seen the labor movement or the trade union movement coming up with those minimum sets of demands and putting them forward to political parties, for political parties to commit or not to commit themselves to those demands.
Chris, let me thank you for your time. That's Chris Malikane. He's an economist from Wits University, for really sharing his insights into labor rights, the economic development and governance in the country's democratic journey as well.